The following is a presentation of 13ABC Action News. Now, your table is ready. Join 13ABC's Jeff Smith with the decision makers of Northwest Ohio and Southeast Michigan. This is the Roundtable.
And a good afternoon. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here on 13ABC Action News' Roundtable program for this Sunday. I'm so glad to have you with us. We have been talking about the economy week in and week out, and today we want to focus more on where you live, where you're watching us right now, and what is happening with the value of your home. We have heard for years how the valuations have gone down, people underwater. If you don't understand that completely, we'll get into that in just a moment. But I've invited for you this afternoon some of the members of the Toledo Board of Realtors office, and with us this afternoon, Barb Stout. She is the TBR board president. Excuse me, Barb, and we appreciate you. Also with Danbury Real Estate, thank you so much for being here. Also, John Magus joins us this afternoon, treasurer for the Toledo Board of Realtors, and also with RE/MAX Preferred Associates. A pleasure, both of you, for being here this afternoon, and a pleasure for our viewers to kind of get into the crux of conversation, John, when just this past week, average U.S. rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage hits a record low of 3.83%. So are we looking at this is now the time to sell or buy finally?
Absolutely. You know, this is a really opportunity of a lifetime. 3.8, 3.75. Yeah. Wow. For people that are in a position to buy a house, there is no better time than right now.
And you don't say that just because you are in the business, but
no, the facts speak for themselves, Jeff. Yeah. I mean, seriously, I mean, inventory is great. Housing affordability is as good as it's been in certainly my career. And look at these interest rates. Yeah. Wow.
And what is the fear factor still out there, Barb, as you talk to homeowners, as you talk to those who are maybe thinking of selling, or they are still in a situation where they don't feel comfortable with moving because of the price of the house where it is now, what it's worth?
Well, their homes are worth maybe a little less than they were a few years ago, but they're going to make that up on the other end because interest rates are low. They're going to, the house on the other end is probably worth a little less than it was a few years ago too, so they're going to make that up, and with the historically low interest rates, there's just no better time.
As far as the timeline of where we are seeing these houses sit, and if you put it on the market from day one to day whatever, is that period of time improving for the seller?
I think in the market we're having right now, yes, it is improving. Okay. We're actually seeing multiple offer situations. In the last, how long would you say, John? 4 or 5 weeks, yeah. Things have heated up tremendously. And
well, get into that. What do you mean by heating up?
Someone in my office has had written 4 offers on 4 different homes, and he's gotten into multiple offer situations on all of them, and his people weren't successful. I mean, that was unheard of a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Yeah, so it's getting more competitive out there.
Absolutely. And Jeff, to framework that a little more, what we're seeing are properties that the seller can perform in a timely manner on. There's way more competition for those. What I mean by that is if there's a property that is subject to lender approval, if it's a short sale or if it's a bank-owned property, the lender has to approve that purchase contract, which delays the process. So if you're a seller who has some equity in their property or perhaps has no mortgage at all, and you're putting your house on the market and it's staged well and priced right, you're going to get an offer, and you're going to get an offer from a buyer who wants to know that they can close within a reasonable timeline.
We go back and we look at recession periods, and everybody says we learned this from that one, we learned that from this one. When you look back to 4 or 5 years ago, when people were going out there and maybe buying a little bit more of a house than they really needed or could afford at that point, because lending was more friendly at that time. I mean, I don't think I'm breaking any new ground in saying that, but when you look at those people who are in those houses right now, do you have clients out there? Are people probably sitting at home saying, I don't think I can sell my house. Right. I know you said on the other end they may make that, but is that a hard thing to grasp when you're thinking what I face in trying to sell this home?
Yes, Jeff, it absolutely is. And unfortunately, there are people who bought even 8, 9, 10 years ago that still are perhaps upside down because there were loans available to them at that time that they could borrow 105, 110, 115% of appraised value. Well, if they did that even 8, 9, 10 years ago, unfortunately, the equity position has never caught up to the amount that they owe on their mortgage.
And now we're getting into that period where, from a national standpoint, you watch any of the national news broadcasts, read any of the newspapers, and they're saying this period that we're in right now may continue on for 20 years. Is that a more national scope, you think, Barb, or do you think the Toledo market, and we'll get into this in just a minute, talking about some of the new businesses that are coming into town and so on and so forth and what that could mean for the industry. But what is your read right now? What is the TBR putting out there to other realtors?
Wow, that's a hard question to answer, but I don't think it's going to be 20 years.
Yeah.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah, it is.
Right now, things are improving.
Is Toledo still a good, I mean, we've had some reports as of late, Toledo's a very affordable, when you look at around the country, Toledo's a very affordable market.
We just got, a week ago, we're
top 3 market.
top three most affordable places at 60, I have it right here, $67 a square foot, which is remarkable to be able to buy a house for that. So Toledo's affordable. A lot of our deals that are happening right now are cash deals, investor deals, and they're $30,000 deals. And that's what's driving a lot of the Toledo business right now.
And you see a lot of people who are looking to get into less of a house right now or more of a house, John?
It depends on where they're at. If we take our baby boomer demographic, we're seeing a lot of the baby boomers downsizing, moving out of the center hall traditional 3,000 square foot house and into a villa or a smaller home. On the other hand, we're seeing a lot of the Gen Xers ranging in age from early 30s to early 40s, 45. We're seeing, as their families are growing, we're seeing them ramping up and going. So we're seeing some generational differences. To answer your question about how long we think this market's going to happen or continue, the real answer really goes back to our Gen Y buyers. And the Gen Y buyers are those that are just maybe still in college to their very early 30s. As the economy improves, as we have more jobs available to that demographic, they're going to be our fix.
Put it in layman. If we have young viewers out there who might be on the cusp of thinking, because we have seen, and you have noticed it as around here and other areas as well, there has been an absolute boom of apartment construction and condominium construction where there's more leasing or renting going on than there has been buying over the last few years. But it was funny because something was said before we started taping today talking about these interest rates and where they are right now. And you still have people out there who are saying, I'm going to wait for it to go a little lower. But when you look in terms of 30 years ago, when you were paying in the teens as far as interest rates were concerned, and where these are, break it down, either one of you, break it down for somebody watching so that they can understand what this means to them as far as these interest rates.
I'll start and you can finish. How's that?
Okay.
And there are probably some bank executives sitting at home saying, I want to be there. I want to talk about this.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Think of it this way. If somebody's buying, let's say, a $120,000 house, first-time buyer, with interest rates under 4%, they're going to have a principal and interest payment of under $600, maybe $580. Now, on top of that, they have homeowners insurance. They have property taxes. They have some other costs. But my point is, they can't go lease one of the brand new high-end apartments more affordably than they can buy.
Yeah, you're talking $1,200 to $1,600 as far as rent is concerned.
Absolutely. So you're looking at a 1,500 square foot home, perhaps, and they can own it with all of their principal, interest, taxes, insurance, for somewhere under $900 a month. And they own a home.
How much savings is having to go into getting that home at this point? There have been some people out there who've said down payments might go upwards of 20% down. I mean, is that where we're sitting right now, or what are those homeowners facing? And I know this is a question better suited for banks, but what are you guys seeing from your clients?
3%.
Yeah, 3% on FHA.
On an FHA loan.
Yeah.
It's not as easy to get a loan as it was a few years ago.
Is that 20 outlandish, what I'm throwing out there, or you've heard the same thing?
I've heard the same thing. I don't think that that will happen. That's part of, and John, maybe you can address that a little bit more.
Yeah. There's been some legislation proposed, asking buyers to have 20% down. Mm-hmm. The National Association of Realtors has strongly opposed it, as have the mortgage bankers and other groups. And we feel as though that would absolutely stifle any recovery that we have happening in the housing industry.
Because plain and simple right now, a lot of people can't afford to do it, and they haven't saved up enough to do it.
Well, back to that Generation Y group, that group demographically is almost as big as the baby boomer demographic. Mm-hmm. The Gen Xers, your demographic turned out, there's about half as many of you as there are boomers or Generation Yers. So, if we take away that ability for them to put 3.5% or 5% down on a conventional and force everybody to put 20% down, it takes them completely out of the market and stifles any recovery, Jeff.
Do you still see homeownership as far as the younger buyers out there being increasingly intimidating?
Oh, I would say so, yeah. I mean, the process has just gotten a lot more tedious than it used to be when I got in the business 21 years ago. Inspection issues, loan issues, appraisal issues. Mm-hmm. They all take a little bit longer, and but the reward in the end is the home ownership.
Yeah.
So
a sense of community that
right.
You mentioned rentals, Jeff.
Right.
I mean, home ownership provides that sense of community, and
I also want to put out there, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I also want to put out there, renting is obviously a viable option for a number of people out there, and we don't want to dispel or talk bad about any of those options that are out there. This is just a historically low time to get into a house. But go on, you were saying.
The intangibles that go with home ownership, sense of community, schools, I mean, there's so many intangibles that come with home ownership that you just don't have that same sense for in a rental environment. Yeah. That was the point I was...
We're going to take it. You brought up schools. We're going to, on the other side, we're going to talk a little bit about how these situations, as far as valuation in home properties, have gone down and affected the way schools react. We're going to have more on that in the school districts. Also talk about the economy in general, jobs coming to the area, what that means for your home value. Stay right there. We'll be right back on this Sunday, right after this.